good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to our webinar on building a blueprint for your workflow automation success. First, a little on who we are. So my name is Tim Stahl. I'm the Senior Director of Architecture here at Decisions. I've been using the platform for over 4 years and actually even started my journey with Decisions as a customer. So I come with about 25 years experience in IT, mostly running IT shops and higher education institutions. And I'm joined by my colleague, Heath Hubbard.
Heath Hubbard. I'm a director on the professional services team. I joined Decisions about 2 years ago and have roughly 25 years of professional services experience within the project and program management spaces.
Awesome. So just another few upcoming events here. We have another webinar upcoming on Thursday, May 18th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern called Capture the Flag, Optimizing Decisions Usage Data. And that's how to configure decisions to capture user data for further insight into your process. Head over to decisions.com/events to register now. And last but not least, Decisions Days 2023 is coming to May 22nd through 24th to Virginia Beach. It's a free premier event for process automation leaders, Decisions customers, and the development community to gain hands-on experience in the Decisions platform. Head over to decisionsdays.com for more info and to register for this free event now. So just a little housekeeping here. We'll absolutely save time for Q&A, but you don't have to wait for that to ask you questions. Feel free to use the Q&A or chat functions in Zoom to submit questions at any time, and we'll seek to answer them as they come in. So here's our agenda. A few things we'll go over today. The first thing we'll hit is why you need a strong foundation. So we're going to go over some topics about the beginning of the process and why we really architect out our solutions to ensure you have a strong foundation to build upon. Then we'll dive into what is an MVP versus long-term planning for your project and how to get the reduce the time to value based on doing a minimally viable product. Next are our shared goals. So basically, what are those shared outcomes that we have from an architecture engagement? Then we're going to hit story time, right? What does a success and a failure look like? We've got some examples of both. Some deliverables. So if you enter into one of these engagement with us, what do you get? What is part of the process and what do you actually get at the end of that engagement? And finally, as I mentioned, we'll save time for some Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. So you need a strong foundation. We're going to talk a lot about this, but this is the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. So now this tower was constructed in 2009, and believe it or not, it's been sinking ever since. There's articles out there. You can simply Google it and all this will come up. So currently the tower is leaning about 29.3 inches at the northwest corner. And the root of the problem is the building's foundation, the piles were placed within the old San Francisco Bay clay, not down to the bedrock further underground. So this construction practice is common in San Francisco, but due to the large other buildings that are near the Millennium Tower, remediation work is needed to stabilize the building's foundation, or it's going to continue to sink, and eventually it's going to collapse. So you can imagine the colossal effort required to set over 1,000 new foundation piles over 300 feet underground beneath an occupied, make that a point, occupied 58-story luxury condo tower. So designing software can have the same challenges. And that's why a strong foundation built on thoughtful planning and design is crucial for achieving long-term software development goals. This foundation serves as that bedrock upon which the entire software system is constructed, and it ensures that it's robust, scalable, and maintainable. By investing time and effort in understanding the user requirements, defining clear objectives and crafting a well-structured architecture during the early stages, you lay that groundwork for a successful development process. Now, this enables your software to adapt to, evolving market demands or incorporate new technologies and seamlessly accommodate future enhancements, ultimately ensuring the longevity and success of your application in a competitive landscape. What we'll focus on today is how the Decision Solutions architecture team works with you to define your foundation and work to reduce your time to value of your investment.
Yeah, just as with a construction project, you need to build a strong foundation for your software project. However, architecture plays a crucial role in during the entire software development lifecycle, shown here. Building that strong foundation during architecture allows you to seamlessly transition between the phases and continue to churn out finished software. As you know, the standard SDLC, software development lifecycle, consists of 6 main stages: planning, discovery, design, implementation, testing and integration, and maintenance. A well-structured software architecture is the backbone that holds these stages together and ensures a smooth transition between them. In the first 2 stages, planning and discovery, and those stages involve gathering requirements and understanding the needs of users and stakeholders. During these stages, software architecture helps us establish a solid foundation by defining the overall structure, components, and relationships of the system. This not only helps in creating a clear project roadmap, but also mitigates potential risks associated with the development process. In the design stage, the software architecture is the key to translating requirements into a blueprint that can be followed by the development team. A well thought out architecture enables efficient communication, reduces ambiguity, and promotes a shared understanding of the system. This ultimately leads to a more robust, scalable, and maintainable design that can adapt to changing requirements or unforeseen challenges. Moving on to the implementation stage, software architecture acts as a guide, ensuring that developers adhere to established coding standards and practices. This results in clean modular code that is easier to understand, debug, and maintain. Furthermore, a well-structured architecture facilitates the integration of different components and promotes reusability, which speeds up the development process and reduces the likelihood of errors. The testing and integration stage greatly benefits from strong architecture, as it facilitates the identification and isolation of defects. With a clear understanding of the system's architecture and relationships, testing teams can more effectively design test cases, ensuring comprehensive coverage and improving the overall quality of the application. And finally, in the maintenance stage, excuse me, this is the maintenance stage is where the benefits of a robust software architecture truly shine. As applications evolve, a well-designed architecture enables easier updates, feature additions, and bug fixes, minimizes the impact on existing functionality. This adaptability is essential for long-term success of an application in today's rapidly changing technology landscape. In conclusion, a solid software architecture is the backbone of any successful application, providing support and guidance throughout the software development lifecycle. From planning and discovery to maintenance, it ensures smooth transitions between stages, facilitates communication, and promotes the development of reliable, scalable, and maintainable applications. Therefore, investing time and effort in crafting a well thought out software architecture is a wise decision that will pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And software architecture and the SDLC are a crucial part of any software project, right? You know, many companies are going to use architecture as a part of their development lifecycle. But now today, we're going to focus on how the decision solution architecture team helps define your project through our architecture engagement process. So when we start an architecture engagement, it can be confusing as to what that entails. You know, our goal here is to give a concrete understanding of what the process is, and more importantly, what it is not. In terms of decisions uses, architecture is an engagement where we work with our clients to define scope, define requirements, gather information related to integrations and security, define who will use the system and how, and come to an agreement on what we're going to build as part of the project. All of this information is then tailored to a requirements document, with each feature expanded to include any forms required, workflows needed, data that may flow in and out of the system, or even be stored for reporting. So, you know, reports and dashboards are called out, and any integrations are as clearly defined as possible. Once this process is complete and the client decisions agrees on the overall scope, our architects build out a work breakdown structure document. Now, your PMs in the audience will know what this is, but what this is it takes the requirements and features from the requirements document and decomposes them into backlog items, and then further decomposes those into the individual tasks that are required to complete that requirement. From this, we're easily able to estimate time required to build the project and work with the client to define what order we need to build it. So now this order is important though, as you'll see later. Having this overall scope prior to starting work, we're able to work with the client to schedule the build to maximize the value realized from our platform as fast as possible. So now many clients begin this engagement thinking we're talking server architecture or infrastructure, networking, containers, et cetera. And while the architecture session will inform our choices related to infrastructure, starting with the hardware would be putting the cart before the horse in this case. So one of the final things that our architecture process will inform is the ability and the how to scale your process. During our engagement, one of the main questions we'll ask is related to the number of users using the system or the expected volume of transactions that are going to flow through the platform. These data points will help us build out a scalable process that'll meet your expectations and grow within your organization.
So MVP versus long-term planning, right? When we look at the SDLC, there are all these different phases that the project goes through over its life cycle. As we architect out your solution, we have the ability to work with you to define what working software looks like. In this case, there are two paths: a completely developed software project and a minimally viable product, or MVP. An MVP is a stripped down version of a product that contains just enough features to fulfill the core user's needs and validate the product's viability in the organization. The primary advantage of an MVP approach is that it allows you to test your assumptions, gather user feedback, and iterate quickly. This helps in reducing the risks associated with investing time and resources and building a full-scale product that may not resonate with your target audience. On the other hand, an entire use case involves building a comprehensive solution that covers all aspects of the problem domain. While this approach can lead to a more complete and polished product, it often requires a considerable investment in time, effort, and resources. Furthermore, it might lack the flexibility to pivot or adapt to organizational feedback, potentially leading to a product that falls short of end user expectations. In essence, the value of an MVP lies in its ability to help you learn and adapt quickly. By focusing on the most critical features and delivering them to users, you can gather invaluable insights and identify areas for improvement. This iterative approach fosters a culture of continuous learning, enabling you to fine-tune your product and better align it with user needs and expectations. While an entire use case may seem like the ideal solution at the first glance, the MVP approach offers a more agile, flexible, and risk-averse path to software design success. By building and iterating upon an MVP, you can hone in on the features that truly resonate with your users, ultimately leading to a product that stands the test of time and thrives in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And let's, now that we've kind of identified what that process is, right? So we've worked with you, we defined the scope, we figured out what the requirements are, and we figured out what the primary pieces of the puzzle are. Let's dive into the process of identifying an MVP within a larger use case and focus on how to pinpoint the essential features that make up the core of your product. So what you see here is a typical project with all the requirements laid out. And the items that need to be built to meet these requirements are circled around them there. As you can see, we've identified quite a number of tasks that need to be completed before we can call this project complete and begin to realize our value. That green bar across the bottom shows the amount of time required before we can start using the complete project, or our lag time there to value. Those are in months on the bottom there. But with the MVP process, our architects work with you on a few specific points to more clearly define the original problem. So we begin by clearly defining the problem you aim to solve for your target audience. This will provide you with a solid understanding of the primary pain points and help you remain focused on addressing the most critical needs throughout the development process. Then we simply list all the features that could potentially be included in your product to address that defined problem, that scoped problem. Once you have this comprehensive list, we prioritize the features based on their importance to the users and their impact on solving the problem. So to identify the MVP, focus on top priority features that are essential for delivering the core functionality and value position of your product. We'll assess the feasibility of implementing the selected features and consider factors such as technical complexity, resource availability, time constraints. This is the standard triangle we always talk about. This evaluation will help you determine if the chosen features are achievable within a reasonable time frame and budget, and they'll ensure a practical and viable MVP. Now, remember though, this MVP is not the end product, but rather this is a starting point for continuous improvement. Once you've launched the MVP, gather user feedback, analyze its performance, and use these insights to iterate and evolve your product. This approach will foster a culture of learning and adaptation within your organization, and it'll allow your product to grow and succeed. So, as you can see here, by going through this process and identifying a reduced scope for the initial build, the time to value here is much shorter as there aren't as many tasks required to complete before we have usable software. So we're able to go from purchasing a platform and envisioning a fully developed product into a smaller time frame whereby we can start using this system. We can start getting the value out of our investment much more quickly. So, we've talked about the process and we've identified what an MVP is, but what are our shared goals from this architecture engagement? What we want is we want you to realize value from your investment as quickly as possible. You'll notice some common themes here. One of the many ways we can help with that, on top of being a no-code platform, got to get that plug in, is to get your MVP or project into production as fast as possible. Now, as with all projects, it's a balance, right? Between the scope of the project, the budget allocated to it, and the time we have to implement it. Now, we're going to strive to architect a solution that meets these needs, the scalability, maintainability, reliability, and performance while preserving that balance.
So a little bit of story time, failures and successes. What does it look like when we don't use our process, right? Don't leverage our architecture process versus when it does. Failures. We have a couple sample projects here. Obviously, I'm going to keep this relatively high level, but I'm going to run through 2 projects for failure and then 2 projects for success. And you're going to see a common thread here. Project 1, larger client, began with no architecture. Their desire was to dive right in and start building with the intent of iterating as we went, right? The agile approach, usually a healthy approach. Unfortunately, in this environment, we had a ton of change, right? The change of scope. Requirements kept changing as the project went on, but this required rework took a bunch of time, right? Expanded the timeline on the project. Overall scalability as it relates to performance of the system wasn't completely taken into account during the initial build or the rework, and it resulted in a system that performed the task. So it did what it was supposed to do, but it did not meet the SLA expectations. The project had a significant investment in time and resources with a delivered project that did not meet the scaling requirements. Second project, again, began with no architecture, and this was due to near-term go-live expectations. While the UI in this scenario was almost completely mocked up, which is a super important part of architecture, the client did not provide an SME, a subject matter expert, assigned to the project to help guide the UI UX direction. We began development based on loosely defined requirements, which required several months of rework.
And now something to think about too is, when we talk about near-term go-live expectations, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't do architecture. And in fact, I think had we taken the time and stepped back and taken a week to really plan out the project and the objectives, I mean, your thoughts, I think we would have had a much more successful outcome than what we actually saw.
Indeed. The common denominator beyond not having architecture is in both cases, we did not define an MVP and then build upon an MVP.
Absolutely. Yeah. Common theme there.
Success, right? It's the inverse of what we just saw. Project 1, client engaged decisions professional services to fully scope out their use case. From the output of that engagement, 3 separate but related releases crystallized, right? So when Tim's talking about the deliverables, as we completed those deliverables, we were able to dig through and isolate an MVP from the greater design. 3 basic bullet points. The back end making some external connections and automating some of the existing workflow, their existing workflow, and end user facing UI to remove redundancy by replacing components, again, currently in their existing workflow, and a reporting component to allow for visibility to back-end processes. The MVP focused on the back-end automation so the client realized value from their investment as soon as possible. The MVP took 3 months from architecture to go live. The 2 other releases followed, each building on the previous MVP. So a bit of a product roadmap was developed as a part of the output of architecture. In the second example here, the client had an approved project with a fixed budget and a relatively short timeline. They were exploring the no-code options to shorten the development cycle. Client engaged PS, Decisions Professional Services, to gauge how long it would take to build out their entire use case. Post-architecture, deliverables indicated a 6-month estimated time to build, while expectations had been established that they needed a functional platform within 4 months. They were trying to meet a timeline here. The team isolated and focused on the critical components, carved out an MVP again, and delivered a version of the use case that with some limited functionality in 3 months. So beating the deadline. After the initial deadline had been met, the longer-term product roadmap was agreed upon and expanded capabilities and the features. So again, architecture leading to an MVP, leading to a product roadmap.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, as we've kind of gone through this and we've talked about all this, right? We've said, here are the things we're looking to do. Here's what we're going to provide you. And we've kind of alluded to it, right? But what actually are the deliverables? What do you get other than, some help getting requirements out and all that? What do you get for this architecture engagement? So we kind of divide it into a few main camps here. The first being the scoping document. So this is, if we use our cake analogy here, this is the description of the recipe. It's the business need, the description of the project, wireframes, process models, ERD. This project or this document is written in plain English. This should be something a business user could pick up and understand, at least from a high level, what's going on, what we're building, why we're building it, who's using it, how they're going to interact with it. The second piece to this would be a work breakdown structure, or as we call it, an RTM, requirements traceability matrix within Decisions. So these are the ingredients, right? Kind of the description of the recipe. These are the ingredients of it. And these are the details down to the task level required to build the actual project. And this will include a time estimate for completion. So, an example project could be maybe a purchase request is the requirement. The way for a user to submit a request would be the backlog item, and the forms and flows that are associated with that, or maybe the rules with it, are the tasks that have to be built to actually make that up. The next would be mockups. This is the icing on the cake. As required and as needed, our architects will work with clients to develop mockups of forms, processes, and dashboards, such that we have an understanding between the client and the Decisions developer building this of what the completed process should look like. So if you have an idea of what the forms need to be, the dashboards need to be, we are all ears and are welcome for that information so we can ensure we can design to that requirement. And finally, the known unknowns, right? This is the filling in the middle here. So we work to uncover what parts of the process are undefined, right? Certain pieces of information, such as integration points, may not be fully understood at the time of architecture. And we'll call those out during the process so everyone is aware of these potential blockers prior to starting work. Now, when we talk about these particular pieces of information here, there are actual documents that go with this. What I'm going to do is change my screen here real quick. 1 second. So when we talk about a design document or a requirements document, we'll make sure this is sharing here, should be. Yep. This is a sample document that we create that actually is, a version of the scoping doc. So if we came down through here, you would see there are things like the goals and purpose. So what are we building, right? You can see this is plain English. Address Corp, they have a database of data regarding their clients. They want to, go through it and ensure the addresses are correct. What's the scope? So what are we going to deliver as Decisions? Some process models so we can visualize this information, and a developer could pick this up and go, I see what I'm supposed to build. This makes sense. I get this. I'm following what they're talking about here. We have some various features. We go through some assumptions. Maybe there's parts of the process we're not aware of yet, or that we have to assume based on data that we haven't uncovered. And then we really drill down into the nitty gritty of what we're actually building, the external integrations and how they work, the mockups as far as forms go, and even email templates and down into data types. And we'll leave that part there because it's a little heady at the very bottom there. But from that, what we're able to do is say, okay, we have these various features that we've developed out here. Then we can take and start building out the RTM, or the work breakdown structure. Now, what that has is those same features we just looked up on the scoping document, we have outlined here in our requirements on our requirements traceability matrix, right? We can see that one of our requirements is an Excel import. Well, what does that entail? What's the description of that? What are the acceptance criteria that Decisions uses to say, we're done? This is ready for go live. This is, this is the definition of complete. From these particular requirements, we can decompose them down into backlog items. For that Excel task, we have to be able to import a file. We need a confirmation of it, and we need a notification that it's complete. Well, that's great and all, but import file, what does that mean? As a user, I should have the ability to launch the import process. Well, what does that entail? And you can see we further break that down into the tasks, and those tasks will actually say, well, you have to create a group and a folder and a form and a flow and test the process. So you can see once we break it down to this level, we're able to go, okay, creating an import flow that has these steps in it, uses this data type, that probably takes an hour. We can go ahead and estimate that. And by summing all this up now, we can give you a real clear idea of how long your project's going to take. But also, if you remember that order and that MVP, we can now start picking this apart. What requirements are most important to get you live quicker? And we'll go on to our build versus buy.
Hey, the build versus buy. I'm assuming everybody understands this term. Simply, it just means that a company makes a decision to build something themselves, to hire resources, to do planning, to get the hardware, right? They build it themselves, or they hire somebody else to build it for them, right? It's the build versus buy. And as Tim mentioned, the output of architecture, those two main deliverables, you're now enabled to have that build versus buy conversation. Our team will have worked with you to identify the MVP and potentially subsequent releases, right? And you'll have a clear understanding of the time and resources required to complete the project. As Tim mentioned, one of the detail points of the requirements traceability matrix is a labor hour estimate, and that those estimates are based on a subject matter expert within Decisions. So again, it enables you to look at the use case and to be able to put time and budget around it.
Awesome. So to recap, a lot of information there in a half hour, which I can't believe it's been a half hour already. Decision software architecture engagements help you to identify what you're building and how, right? We ensure that the correct stakeholders are involved and are committed to your project, that the scope clearly defined and agreed to, and then an MVP is possible, and how we can reduce your time to value. And finally, of course, that the project's going to meet your expectations related to scalability and reliability. The thing to remember and the thing to take away here is that architecting your solution is the key to your success and reduce time to value. With that, I'd love to open the floor up. I know there was a lot of information there. If anybody had any questions or comments, concerns they'd like to throw out in the channel, we'd be more than happy to answer anything that's come up. I'll give it a couple minutes here and see if anybody pops anything into the Q&A or the chat here.
Yeah, I actually see some questions that are coming in. One of the ones that was most interesting to me was you've given some recommendations on how to get some documentation put together, like how to be prepared for entering one of these engagements. But I wondered if you had any more kind of specifics about that. Like if I'm a new customer and I'm looking to engage with professional services to do some architecture planning, what are some things that I should bring with me to those first meetings or should have prepared before I talk with Decisions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It comes up often. When we're starting an engagement with a client, the more information you can come to the table with, the better, right? And when I say that, what we're looking for are any mock-ups or workflow diagrams that you currently have. If you've taken the time as an organization to craft up what this project and process needs to be, created flowcharts, created mock-ups, created any kind of internal project management sort of deliverables, like a requirements document. Any of that information you can provide to us during or before the process really, really helps us out. Especially any integration points. If Decisions is going to have to, or if we're going to have to integrate with a third-party system, knowing about that sooner rather than later is key, because that can affect the lead or lag time on when certain other pieces of the project can be done. But again, kind of circling back, really, the requirements, the scope clearly defined, and a workflow diagram of some kind of how the process needs to flow through is really key. I don't know, Heath, if you had any kind of documents that you could think of that would help during the initial start of the process.
Yeah, so if you have an existing ERD, or you have an existing process model of your current workflow, what that you intend to improve, that helps a lot. And then as Tim mentioned, any sort of mock-ups, CSS, right? Any sort of UI UX preferences or expectations. Those things really help our architects get a foothold early.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I saw we did have another one come in the Q&A here. How long and how much effort does it usually take to create the docs to describe the boundaries of an MVP? Right. So there's some art to the science when you start talking about this. The level of effort, if we have clearly defined requirements, backlog items, and tasks in a project, and the user, the client, has identified what the minimum components are required to gain value from the system, the level of effort's not that great, right? You can start picking apart the pieces of the project and say, okay, because I've done my homework and I've gotten my dependencies, I know what things have to flow in what order. I can start picking it out and saying, okay, maybe because during this Excel upload that we were looking at earlier, really what they need at the end of the day is just a way for someone to upload a file. All the automation may be secondary to that. And if we've gone and done our homework of, what all the pieces are and talked to the client, said, we can do all this. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we could do it. Maybe it's a 3-month engagement, but we talk to them and say, oh, you need something in a month. Well, what piece of this gives you the most value quickly? And they would say, it's this part. Maybe it's just that file upload piece is what they really need to get started. Then we could easily pull that out of the document we created, sum those tasks up and say, here's your estimate. Here's a statement of fact of how long it's going to take. There are a couple others that are popping in here. How is Decisions different from other automation tools like Visagi or Pega systems? Another good one that comes up. I spent some time on the sales side, so I'm uniquely qualified to answer this. But our code is a no-code platform, right? We strive and pride ourselves in having a platform that a user can go in with training. Someone with a development mind can go in with training and build out their processes visually, right? You're not in there writing code. In Pega, you have to build out your data structures. You have to write code around those. It's a low-code platform, but you still have to know that programming language to be able to realize benefits from it, or engaging their services department to do such. But with Decisions, if you can understand a Visio chart and a workflow chart, and you kind of have that little bit of that developer mind, that kind of process-oriented development style thinking, then you're able to go in and say, okay, I know I need to send an email. I need to show a form. I need to, XYZ, whatever it happens to be, and draw that out, hit debug, and you have your software. Is it finished software at that point? No, but you have the blueprints for it and you can keep building upon it. So really major differences are no code at Decisions versus low code like Pega. I see Alex asking, do you capture test cases at the same time? We will. That's a great question. So there's a definition of ready or an acceptance criteria within the documents that we create. And those documents will have that acceptance criteria. And sometimes that would be a test, right? Here's a payload. We need to ensure that when it comes out the other side, it looks like this. So when we build that flow, we know we send that payload in, logic happens, and out the other side comes our result. Yeah, that great question. Got another one. We're our questions are going live here. Does that lead to limitation of the platform? I'm going to assume you're meaning the low code versus no code. It does not, and I'll preface this with why. We are a low code platform or no code platform. We do also have a C# SDK. So there is a backdoor behind that if there are modules or pieces of technology that you need to integrate with, such as legacy systems, things that don't have APIs, custom steps that do business logic strictly for your business, you do have the ability to add that. Now, with over 4,000 steps in the toolbox, you'll be surprised that most of what you want to do is already there. But we do have about 1 or 2% of our customers that use that SDK to extend the platform where needed. Cool. I got another one. Is the design document available on your website? It is not, but I have your name here, and I can take a note to send you a copy of that. Any other questions or comments, concerns, or topics of discussion? I see one came in about, do you have time estimates for typical tasks? Yes, that's we actually work on creating kind of a template of tasks. Now, it's kind of hard to have a base estimate for every one of them because as you could imagine, every project's going to be a little bit different. Every way we implement a flow may be a little different, but we kind of have a starting point. It really becomes something that's within the architect's head, that as they're developing it, they get an idea for what certain pieces of work are going to take. Let's think 1 second here. Okay. They get an idea of what certain pieces of work are going to take. We'll use not only a template that, kind of like a knowledge base that we have of certain projects, of certain tasks, but also real world, right? We can look back within our project management system and see when a tech or a developer did a certain piece of work, we can see what the actual was as well. So that can also help us inform that decision. Do we need a dedicated decisions expert to maintain the system? We recommend that you have someone who is your subject matter expert in decisions. So does it have to be a developer all the time? No. If you're engaging professional services to build out the project you want, we suggest having someone who's the point person for that, right? That understands the project, that knows the ins and outs of it, that understands how to maintain that moving forward, whether that's in just simple configuration, or maybe even, some have experts who are within the companies that can provide updates to that system as well. So it does depend on what the project is you're doing and your level of comfort within a platform like this. But at minimum, I would say someone who is at least dedicated as a subject matter expert on the project that you have would be ideal. Well, again, we appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for coming out and listening to our webinar. We will end it here. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us at the emails, numbers, and various other sources that we have on the slide here, or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn at any time.